Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm going to be giving some tips for drawing characters at different ages ranging from child to adult. I remember always having a really hard time drawing characters that were different ages. All of the characters I drew looked like they were in their mid-teens, and when I would try to draw kids, they would kind of just look like small teenagers. So yeah. Drawing characters at different ages can be kind of tricky, especially if you don't know what to change. So let's take a look at what changes as a character gets older. We'll start with female characters and then we'll move on to male characters. Also, the human body can be many different shapes and proportions, but I'll only be discussing one body type for each gender. So let's start by taking a look at what changes take place in the female face. That rhymes. Also, the child's head should be much smaller than the adult's head, but to help us notice the differences, I made the child's head almost the same size as the adult's head. One of the things that changes a lot is the jawline. So the child's jawline is overall rounder and shorter, while the adult's jawline is longer and more angular. The teenager is somewhere in the middle, more angular than the child, but not as long as the adults. Another thing that really changes is eye placement. When a character is younger, the eyes are lower on the head. So for the child's eyes, they are very low on the head and pretty large. They are below the halfway point of the head. With the teenager, the eyes move up some, but they don't really change in shape, at least when it comes to this style of face. The eyes move closer to the halfway point. For the adult, the eyes move even higher on the face. They are now really close to the halfway point, and they also get more narrow. They are now wider than they are tall. So basically, the older the character gets, the higher up the eyes move. However, they don't go past the halfway point of the head. So you know, an old person won't have their eyes on their forehead. Some other details I want to point out is that the ears for the child are lower on the head and rounder. For the adult and the teen, they get higher up on the head and they get more angular. I also change how I draw the nose for adult characters. This is just a style choice. You can keep the nose the same if you want to. I like changing how I draw it because it makes the nose look more big and more defined. Lastly, I make the eyelid get more prominent as the character gets older. I don't know, I just find this helps them look a bit older. So now that we have taken a look at how the head changes, let's take a look at how the body changes. When I draw the body, I measure it using the length of the head. This sometimes confuses people, so let's go over my measuring process. So I have a head, and I want the body that I'm going to be drawing to be 6 heads tall. So I take the length of the head and stack it 6 times. This gives me the length for how long I want the body to be. So this body is 6 heads tall. I often use this body type for younger teens. The crotch is at the halfway point of the body. So basically the body is 6 heads tall. So the lower body is 3 heads long and the upper body is 3 heads long. Little kids are the exception to the crotch goes at the halfway point rule. Kids often have kind of short legs. For kids, I make the legs pretty much the same length as the torso instead of the same length as the upper body. So let's take a look at how the body changes as it ages. First, we have the child body. It is 4 heads tall. I would use this body type for a kid that is around age 6 or 7. I try to keep everything very round. There also isn't any gender-defining characteristics in the shape of the body yet. This body shape could work for a boy or a girl. Next, we have the body that is 5 heads tall. I would use this body for a preteen character ages 10 to 12. We start to see the hips and waist form as the character starts to turn into a teen. When they become a teen, I draw them as 6 heads tall. The chest is now more developed and the hips are more noticeable. She is starting to get more of an hourglass shape. Lastly, we have the adult body that is 7 heads tall. I would use this body for characters that are 18 or older. She now has a full hourglass shape and her hips are very defined and her chest is fully developed. I noticed while drawing all of these that none of them fitted how I drew my mid-teen characters in my comic, My Next Door Neighbors. 6 seemed to be too small and 7 seemed to be too big. I used kind of a weird measurement, which is 6.5 heads tall. It's in between the younger teen and the adult, Basically, I just make the proportions of the 7 head tall body a bit smaller. I find it kind of funny, I never noticed this before. I always thought I drew them kind of as 6 heads tall, but it's actually a bit bigger. Another thing I want to point out is the neck. As the character gets older, the neck gets wider and longer. Now that we've taken a look at how girls change, let's take a look at how male characters change. I'm not going to talk about the boy child age very much because it's pretty much just like the girl version. Instead, I want to focus more on the preteen age. For my girl characters, the face doesn't change very much from the preteen to the mid-teen. It's pretty much the same. This is because my female characters already look pretty young. However, for my male characters, the face changes a lot more from preteen to teen. The preteen boy has a similar face proportion to my teen girls. I do try to make the face a little more angular for the boy. When the boy becomes a teen, the jawline gets longer, the eyes move higher up on the head, and become more narrow, kind of like the adult female face. When the teen boy becomes an adult, the eyes move even higher on the head and they get even more narrow. The jaw also becomes even more angular. Like I mentioned before, as the character gets older, the ears move higher up on the head and aren't as round. The neck also gets thicker and wider. Okay, let's talk about how the male body changes. For girls, it was the hips and the chest that develop. For males, it's mostly the shoulders that change. For the male preteen body, I make it 6 heads tall. You may notice that my male characters are 1 head taller compared to my female characters. The preteen girl is 5 heads tall, but the preteen boy is 6 heads tall. The preteen boy doesn't really have any defining characteristics yet. However, as he becomes a teen, the shoulders get broader and the waist gets more narrow. We can also see more muscle development. I draw the teen boy as 7 heads tall, a head taller than my teen girls, or half a head taller than what I draw my webcomic girl characters at. Lastly, we have the adult male. He is 8 heads tall. Once again, he is a head taller than the adult female. The shoulders get even wider and the waist gets a bit more narrow. So here's a look at all the different bodies and faces. So those are my tips for drawing characters at different ages. I hope these tips were a bit helpful. Thank you all so much for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I really like making tutorials, but they often don't get as many views as my other videos, and this can be kind of discouraging, especially since my tutorials take a lot of work. So if you could share this video, I would really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you watching it till the end and taking the time to watch this video. Anyways, I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye! But not as long as the adults. The teenager... I want my cold to go away. I'm tired of coughing. This gives me the length for how long. This gives me the length. This gives me the length for how I... Lastly, we have the adult body. Ow, I just hurt my back. Ow. Let's take a look at how Free Shavakadoo.